Welcome to Protagonist Pub. My name is Tammy, and this is where characters gather. Today we're going to talk about middle grade recommendations that I grew up reading, books that have fallen out of favor somewhat or have been interpreted for the modern mind and have thus lost the essence of what was actually written, or books that are just out of favor in general, which I don't understand, but we'll leave that politics for yourself. I don't own any of these. As I said in my previous recommendation video, we don't have kids. I don't reread books, so I don't keep copies of them. First up would be A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. I read this, I want to say when I was 9 or 10, so decades ago. This was my first big, thick, honking chapter book. I remember everybody being surprised that I read it when I did, which I didn't understand, but that's fine. This was historical fiction. It is the story of the main character's name. I cannot remember her name. I will link it down below or put it down below. Growing up in Brooklyn, I remember losing myself in this book. I remember curling up in the backyard. My brother and all his friends were off, playing in the pool and with the dogs and stuff, and all I wanted to do was read. So that's what I did. I read, and I remember not picking up another book until I finished it. I probably finished it 2 or 3 days. And I didn't know the terminology for it at the time, but I definitely had a book hangover. I remember this distinctly. I may not be able to tell you the plot in intricate detail without, going to Wikipedia and looking it up, which is fine. However, I remember the impact that book had on my life and how a little girl who already loved reading just fell head over heels in love with reading, and that passion has never left me. Next up would be the Anne of Avonlea series by L.M. Montgomery. There have been several film adaptations to this book, some more or less faithful to the series than others. Anne of Avonlea she's another one of those books that just, when I was growing up, I devoured that series. Anne is an orphan. She's adopted by a brother and sister who really wanted a boy but ended up with Anne. She goes to live with them on Prince Edward Island in Canada, and her life and their lives are never the same again. And I think initially when my mom bought the books for me, I remember she bought the books for me. I think I was initially so attracted to them because my middle name is Anne, and her name was Anne, and she spelled it the same, and it's, an rarely used spelling of Anne. I loved these books. Even as a kid, I didn't reread a lot. I reread Anne more than once. If you have a girl who's a girly girl who loves fun and adventure, and go do her a favor. Go pick up L.M. Montgomery's Anne of Avonlea series. she will thank you for it. Next up are two separate series, but they're related. My brother loved one, I loved the other. First up is the Nancy Drew Mysteries by Carolyn Keene, and the Hardy Boys series by Dixon. I'll put his name down below. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head. I love Nancy. My brother loved the Hardy Boys. Nancy Drew is one of the series responsible for my deep, lifelong, abiding love of mysteries. I read every single Nancy Drew written by Carolyn Keene. I have not read any of the modern ones attached to the storyline. I read these over and over and over again. I would dip into the Hardy Boys because sometimes there was a Hardy Boy Nancy Drew crossover. And plus, the Hardy Boys, they were mystery books. The boys were pretty cute sounding, and I was of that age, and so I read the Hardy Boys too. I could not get enough of these books. To this day, she will always hold a special place in my heart. Nancy Drew is just a solid, so are the Hardy Boys. Just solid mystery series for kids. Next up, this is going to be controversial because it is no longer a politically correct thing to read, but Little House on the Prairie series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. Another book series I devoured. I wasn't allowed to watch the television program growing up. It was on too late. It was past bedtime. So I would always try to convince babysitters to let me watch it when it was on. I've watched the series as an adult, so I didn't suffer as a child. I've seen them all. I loved these books. They were well thumbed. They are incredibly well written. Yes, I can understand why some people, given today's political environment, might find them objectionable, but it is wrong, in my opinion, to impose modern political viewpoints on authors of the past. It is wrong to assume that just because an author doesn't model your belief system, they have nothing of value to contribute. Laura Ingalls Wilder is wildly out of favor. That should not be. Her books are worth the investment, they're worth the time to read, and they are an important linchpin in understanding our past and wanting to do better, or how to... You can use them as a jumping off point to talk to your kids. Do not discount Little House on the Prairie. They're very good books. And the last one I want to recommend for non-modern middle grade reads are two series, the authors of whom I do not know off the top of my head. I will link them down below. The first is the Boxcar Kids, and then Trixie Belden. Both mystery series, both long running. Again, books I devoured as a child. Check them out at the library. Librarian would get them at interlibrary loans if they didn't have them all. I loved these books. Which shouldn't be a surprise because, I love mystery stories, so these fit perfectly. One more recommendation. My brother loved this series growing up, and that was the Encyclopedia Brown series. Don't know who wrote it. I will put it down below. I didn't read much of Encyclopedia Brown. I was a little bit older at the time, and it was a little bit of a younger series, and just it didn't catch my fancy. And the last and not least other two authors I will mention here are Judy Blume, and she wrote the Ramona series. I will put her down here. So Judy Blume wrote Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. She wrote a bunch of other books. Maybe she wrote the Ramona series too. I'll have to check. If there's a different author for the Ramona series, I will list her. Judy Blume books are whimsical and fun and great, and every pubescent teenage girl I know read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. I can't fathom growing up and not reading that book as a girl. It handles its subject matter perfectly. The Ramona books are fun and hysterical, and I enjoyed them immensely. I think my brother enjoyed them too. So, read them. Read them to your kids. Introduce your kids to them. Those are my recommendations for non-modern middle grade fantasy or middle grade reads for March. They are perfect for all times of the year. Just because a book wasn't written in the 2000s does not mean it is without value. Just because a book is, 100 plus years old does not mean it's worthless and out of date and pointless. Do your kids and yourself a favor and read some literature, middle grade books that have withstood the test of time, and enjoy yourselves. It's March, it's middle grade. Have fun with it. Please like and subscribe and leave your comments down below, and I look forward to seeing you here next time at the Protagonist Pub.